All right, let's dive right into this explainer and unpack the absolutely thrilling magical resolution of the Squashlight Saga. If you've been following along, you know we've just witnessed a completely chaotic climax at the town gallows. Well, today we're focusing exclusively on the final two chapters of the story, chapters 20 and 21. We're going to see exactly how the dust settles, how justice is served, and most importantly, how the hidden magical mechanics of this world secretly resolved a massive supernatural crisis.
So picture the immediate headache for the town after that crazy morning. Carol Belle, Old Lady King, and Miss Tasha were literally standing on the gallows, fully expecting to hang for the supposed murder of young Watt Wagholter, because they allegedly turned him into a pumpkin. But then, not only does Stingy Jack show up, but Watt miraculously bursts right out of that unusually orange pumpkin as a living, breathing young man, declaring the women totally innocent. The town is just stunned. And it leaves our local official, Judge Jackson Knott, with an incredibly bizarre legal nightmare. Seriously, how do you punish 3 accidental witches who saved a boy by inadvertently turning him into a vegetable?
Just think about the sheer speed of this morning's chaos. Barely an hour ago, those gallows were just being built in the dark. 30 minutes ago, Stingy Jack drops off the glowing squashlight. And just 15 minutes ago, Watt returns as a human, using magical fire to set the women free. So right now, the town is left completely dumbfounded, wandering around with literal pumpkin guts hanging off their faces. It is the perfect, messy setup for Chapter 20, where the town has to somehow recover and reestablish some sense of normalcy.
Section 1. The Aftermath of Chaos. Recovering from the Gallows.
Now, instead of tossing the women back into a filthy jail cell, Judge Knott and his wife do something kind of shocking. They bring these 3 exhausted women straight into their own home for brunch. They let them sleep, they burn their prison clothes, hand them clean housecoats, and feed them a hot, home-cooked meal. It's a really beautiful, humanizing moment after so much supernatural hysteria. But, the ordeal took a huge toll. The sheer weight of trying to appease a frantic mob while balancing true justice actually forces Judge Knott to forgo running for re-election. He realizes it's time for a major career change. But before he officially steps down, he has one final act to carry out.
Section 2. A Sentence of Education. Mortal Justice in the Hamlet. Because a crime of sorts did happen, the judge has to hand down a verdict. But instead of punishment, he passes down this incredibly unconventional sentence for what he calls negligent witchcrafticide. The women's lives completely transform. They go from being local outcasts to the founders of a brand new educational institute. Carol Belle upgrades from simple schoolmarm to a full-on teacher of maths and sciences. Old Lady King, who can't even live at our ancestral home by the bog anymore, shifts from hedge witch herbalist to the physical health and horticulture teacher. And Miss Tosha, her codex shop is permanently closed, so she gets promoted to librarian and home economics teacher. They aren't being locked up, they're being sentenced to educate.
This sentence requires 2 massive structural shifts for the town, setting the stage for a real transfer of local power. First, they're using all the remaining town treasury funds for the year to build this state-of-the-art institute. Second, and actually this is absolutely crucial for later, they are converting Carol Belle's old schoolhouse into a town chapel specifically for pilgrimage. The judge insists the place needs more culture, so they want to attract traveling monks, friars, and nuns.
And the best part? The judge holds himself totally accountable. The new rules state that all children receive an education, and students with tuition can stay in boarding quarters. But to top it off, Judge Knott essentially sentences himself to municipal malpractice by serving as the institution's very first headmaster. He figures, hey, he's working with kids, so what's the worst that could happen? It just wraps up the public mortal narrative in this really tidy, progressive bow.
Section 3. The Secret of the Bog. The Hidden Magical Reality. But come on, we know there's always more going on beneath the surface, right? We're moving from that sunny town square and comforting brunch right back into the shadowy, bubbling depths of the ancient bog. Because just a couple of hours before dawn, while the judge is fast asleep, we discover a huge secret. Mrs. Tamala Knott puts on a pointed hat and makes a secret visit to the bog. That's right, the judge's supportive wife is actually a retired witch, and she is heading straight for the quicksand to have a very stern word with someone.
Here we see this super stark contrast between 2 magical sisters and their totally different approaches to power. Tamala summons Jenny Greenteeth from the bog. Now, Jenny is an active bog witch. She's chaotic, she's vengeful, and she literally created that quicksand just to stir up trouble because the magical ecosystem felt out of balance to her.
Tamala, though, she's retired, claims she now quote-unquote practices marriage, and operates entirely in the mortal world. She's calm, collected, and highly strategic.
And then Jenny drops this massive bombshell of a taunt that completely rewrites our understanding of the whole story. She says, "Oh, sister, you gave up the craft for your beloved prince. Remember? What would you know of bog magic anyways?" This casual little insult reveals that Judge Jackson Knott is actually incognito royalty. He has the blood of kings running through his veins. They literally gave up everything just to be together in this quiet little hamlet.
Section 4, Preternatural Dibs Explained. The Rules of the Realm.
So why does that royal bloodline matter? Well, it establishes a really fascinating magical mechanic known as preternatural dibs. It sounds kind of funny, but it's the overarching magical authority established when royalty makes civic decisions, or when holy elements like Bibles or clergy are introduced to an area. When these forces show up, they effectively banish and overpower chaotic local bog magic. Understanding this rule is exactly why the judge's mortal verdicts earlier were actually a masterstroke of magical defense, and it was completely invisible to the average townsperson.
Jenny assumes Tamala must have helped the three women cast their massive spell to save Watt, but Tamala reveals she didn't lift a finger. Instead, William focused his energy and the women just tapped directly into the frenetic frequency of the mob. They didn't even have their grimoires. They improvised, using the raw, panicked energy of the townspeople combined with the curse of the fates. It was entirely unintentional, yet ridiculously powerful.
But here's the real kicker. Chaotic bog magic's time is officially up. Because Jackson has royal blood, and because he specifically decreed a new chapel to bring in clergy, the bog's chaotic influence is rapidly being overpowered by preternatural dibs. It's essentially creating an absolute magical firewall around the hamlet. The presence of royalty making civic decisions, combined with incoming holy clergy, just leaves zero room for wild magic.
Section 5. The final twist. The mastermind revealed.
Okay, let's dive into this incredible finale, where the hidden puppeteer of the entire story finally steps out of the shadows. Remember when Tamala told Jenny she practices marriage? Well, she was telling the absolute truth. She used her royal husband's authority to quietly solve the town's magical infestation. By gently guiding the mortal justice system, maybe chatting it over during that very brunch, she arranged for a chapel to be built. She weaponized civic planning and her husband's royal bloodline to institute preternatural dibs, completely checkmating her chaotic sister. Faced with this totally unstoppable incoming force of preternatural dibs, with monks, friars, and nuns arriving by Christmas, the chaotic bog witch realizes she's beat. She is forced to retreat. Jenny Greenteeth sinks right back into the bubbling bog, promising it isn't over, but she is utterly defeated for now, leaving the hamlet alone. And Tamala? She kept back just enough information as she flies over the town that she just saved through sheer political and marital strategy. She lets out a witch's cackle. It completely confirms that a brilliant witch was orchestrating the town's salvation this entire time. And that brings us to the end of our explainer on the final chapters of Squatch Light. So I'm going to leave you with this provocative thought to ponder. Who was really in control of the town the entire time? Was it the judge with his gavel, or his wife with her quiet brilliance and deep understanding of preternatural dibs? It makes you completely rethink power, magic, and who really writes the laws in this hamlet. Thank you so much for joining me to unpack this fascinating story, and keep exploring.